I thought I would have him on, considering that's pertinent, considering that the grand jury in the Russia investigation, I guess, it got extended another 6 months. So we're going to have that on the program. The show starts in 5 seconds.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Happy Monday to everybody out there. Happy Monday. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine, and we can't do that without you every single day listening to the program. The phone number to call or text is 870-275-9799. We have a great show for you today. We've got a lot of news to get to. We are now in the we're in the middle of the government shutdown. What is this? It's tied for the third longest record with no side and end. Joe and I have both been saying that we think this will be the record. We think that President Trump will get the record out of here. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Coming up at 7:33, we're going to be talking with John Milkovich. He's a Democrat state senator from Louisiana. But he's the author of a book, and I found this interesting. I had this kind of pitched to me to, hey, you have this guy on. And so he's author of a book called Robert Mueller, Errand Boy for the New World Order. I wanted to know what that was about, especially a Democrat saying these things. It made me, right? That doesn't compute with me. And in today's, I think everybody would agree that right now the political landscape is in a period of great change when it comes to just what does a traditional Democrat or historically a Democrat believe, what does historically a Republican believe. Things are evolving, right? I think you see that. Well, I mean, just within just the way President Trump and how he rubs the establishment in the Republican Party the wrong way, and then if you look at what's happening in the Democrat Party with the socialists are pretty much taken over, where they're openly advocating socialism, the idea that we should be forced to give the government all of our money and have them divide it up appropriately and send it back to us. It's fascinating time. So the idea that a Democrat state senator would write this book about Robert Mueller. Of course, the grand jury it's now been extended for another 6 months, according to reports. We'll talk to him 7:33. Hey, at 7:05 this morning, I'm going to be going over some Arkansas news, some interesting headlines. There was a piece in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette about the relationship between Governor Asa Hutchinson, the familial relationship between Governor Asa Hutchinson and his nephew, Senator Jim Hendren, who is now the president pro temp of the Senate starting a week from today. The General Assembly will convene a week from today. That was an interesting piece, to say the least. I'll talk about that. As well as we want to give you an update on what's happening in Pope County with the casino and the racing commission rules. We'll talk about that. The Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, declining to issue an opinion. She was requested to issue an opinion on, essentially the legality of everything that's going on right now when it comes to Pope County outgoing mayors, outgoing judges on their last day submitting letters wanting a casino, basically saying we want the casino to come to Pope County. So Senator Breann Davis requesting that opinion from Leslie Rutledge declining to issue an opinion. Then you have the Arkansas Racing Commission changing the rules, which looks like that may alleviate a little bit of a problem, but we're not really sure. We don't know. We're not 100% on any of this because this is all new territory to us. It's new territory if you don't think that, insurance companies aren't already casinos. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. So let's start with the top, shall we? All right, President Trump. We are in the government shutdown, tied for the third longest, and there's no end in sight. And this is driving the people that believe that government is the thing that exists in this world that defines who they are. It really is they're having a hard time with this. The partial government shutdown, according to USA Today, over funding for a border wall reached a milestone. So now it's not necessarily a border wall, though. Okay, it could be a border fence, could be steel slats. Essentially, there just needs to be some sort of barrier. I think that's what the president has said. Look, if they don't want me to call it a wall, I won't call it a wall. Isn't that hilarious? Which by saying that, by the way, it's just going to it's just kind of going to ensure that there's not going to be an agreement, right? Hey, if they don't want me to call it a wall, we'll call it something else. So that they can go back to their side. That's the general idea behind that. They can go over to their side. So we didn't give them the wall. We gave them a barrier. We gave them fencing. And as of right now, that seems to be the only bit of compromise from our side that President Trump's willing to give, is willing to change what he calls the wall, which is really funny to me. So we have that going on. And we have, let's see here, Lindsey Graham. I'll talk about him here in just a moment. He was on, was it the CBS show, Face of the Nation? And he said that no progress on the shutdown because the radical left sees the border security as racist. Now, that's exactly what I said. I did almost a 20-minute piece on this on Friday where I said they believe that if they allow, they think President Trump wants a wall because he's racist or a white supremacist or a KGB agent or a Nazi. They haven't really, it's like all of those things. It's like everything we hate, we're going to cast on one person, and he's the embodiment of those terrible things in modern day America. So that is what Lindsey Graham said, and that's what I said, because that's really, I don't think that's what Nancy Pelosi really believes, but that's what the far left wing of her party believes. And that's also what is the most advantageous political point at this point to maintain political power, is to constantly say that we are the Democrat Party and our main job is to correct perceived social injustice. And that's what we talked about on the program on Friday. Now, here's the thing. Can we get President Trump? This is President Trump delivering a statement upon his departure. We got this YouTube up, and he talks about going to Camp David yesterday. So President Trump yesterday, right before he departed for Camp David, Joe, cue this up. He said this right before he departed from Camp David. Go ahead.
But the surge has never been stronger, and we have to build the wall or we have to build a barrier. The barrier or the wall can be of steel instead of concrete if that helps people. It may be better. But I'm willing to do that. So our great steel companies, which are now back in business, they were doing very poorly when I took office, and now they're doing very well. A lot of steel workers working that never had a chance of getting a job in the steel industry again. Our steel industry was dying, and now it's very vibrant. I intend to call the head of United States Steel and a couple of other of our great steel companies to have them come up with a plate or a design of a beautiful steel product, which we now make here, and we'll use that as our barrier. So we're trying to do everything possible to get money to our incredible people But many of those incredible people agree with me, and they say, make sure you win this battle. This is a very important battle to win from the standpoint of safety, number one, defining our country and who we are, also from the standpoint of dollars. This wall will pay for itself many times during the course of a year. The money we're talking about is very small compared to the return. You'll receive a return many times during the course of the year. That's the kind of numbers we're talking about. But most importantly, it's about safety. It's about security for our country. It's about stopping human traffickers. It's about stopping drugs. So we have to have it. Gotta have it. We have no choice. It's not a question. You think I like doing this? I don't like doing this. But we have no choice. We have to have it.
All right, stop for a second. All right, we'll come back to that here a little bit later. Interestingly enough, I'm curious. All of you out there, if you're listening to this program, more than likely you are someone who is on the right, and you know, are pretty well grounded, and you know how to defend the opinions that you have. But in doing this, the media obviously is not going to tell the complete truth, but they can't avoid telling the mainstream media. They can't avoid telling the average person, or maybe somebody who's in the middle, that still thinks that they can get some sort of a fair shake by listening to CNN. I know, it's crazy, but there are those people out there. They have to tell them, look, we're in the middle of a government shutdown. They're going to have to tell them that. And they're going to have to tell them why. It's over whether or not we build a wall. Now, the media is certainly bending over backwards trying to say, and they're giving Democrats plenty of platform to say, a wall will not improve border security. Now, I think there's a lot of people out there in the middle that do not believe that when they hear it, because it is a laughable thing to say that a barrier will not improve the security of your border. Adding more barriers, of course, it's common sense to think about it. Just think about it. If you have a home and you put a wall around your home, you now have more security, don't you? It is common sense. I don't see how you can argue the point. I know the media wants to, but see, I'm wondering here if doing this isn't going to work to President Trump's advantage, just like that Oval Office meeting a couple of weeks ago, where the press had to cover it because here are three people that supposedly hate each other, but they have to work together. Schumer, Pelosi, Trump, and they come out, and their body language, was saying everything. Well, I think Vice President Pence has said more, actually. But Donald Trump firmly, exposed them as being anti-border security. I know they said we're for border security, but that's not. It was patently obvious, certainly obvious who was the more likable person in the room, and it wasn't Nancy, Chuck, or Mike. It was Donald. He was definitely the more likable person, just trying to make a deal, and it was very productive. At least I enjoyed it. I mean, the entertainment value was sky high, but it was also nice to see these people be forced to have the conversations in front of the cameras. So I'm wondering, are there independents out there who are coming over to the right side of the aisle on this issue? And of course, if you look at polling, well, and it depends on which poll you look at, but there are polls out there that show that this is a very popular issue with the middle part of the country, the 60% of the country, if you will. So anyway, President Trump, according to reports, may very well declare, and it may happen this week or next week or who knows, may very well declare a national emergency. And then, after he declares such national emergency, the reports are that he will order the United States military, he will use funding from the Department of Defense to build the wall Anyway, the Daily Caller has this report. Trump may declare national emergency at the border. President Donald Trump is considering declaring a national emergency at the southern border in order to use his powers as commander-in-chief to begin construction of his proposed wall. This is what he told reporters Sunday, I believe at this right before he departed for Camp David. Quote, I may decide a national emergency depending on what happens over the next few days, Trump said Sunday, continuing to float an option as his administration negotiates with Democratic leaders over how to end the government shutdown. Trump is demanding $5.6 billion. We know all this. You scroll down here. Trump first told reporters Friday he is able to declare a national emergency using his authority. Now, so what did the press do? The press on the Sunday shows then went to Democrats, a guy by the name of Adam Smith, a Democrat by the name of Adam Smith, and they asked him, can he do this? And the Democrat said yes. Yes. He said the president has the authority to declare a national emergency and build the wall himself. Now, he said that that's not a good idea. He said it's a waste of money, blah, blah, blah. He also said it would be challenged in court because he's going to have to demonstrate what is the emergency. Folks, I have said for a long time, now in our press, and this is the thing, if Trump declares a national emergency and it goes to court and the courts eventually side with him, what a rebuke of our media here. I have said for a long time that what is going on at the southern border, in places, it's one of the most violent places on the planet. But with the drugs, with the fentanyl, with the human trafficking, and notice, I have heard President Trump say human trafficking probably more than any president when it comes to what's going on our southern border. And the Democrats want to shut down, they want to keep the government shut down for that? Come on. There's a real situation down there. It is a crisis, and it has been for a very long time. Folks, they find vans full of torsos, just torsos, because of the violence going down there, with the drugs and the cartels and things like that. And now I've got to read reports. I read one last night right before I dozed off. I got to read reports about these liberals who are lamenting that Hollywood and TV have besmirch the Hispanic community because so many times when they do stories and there's a Hispanic character, the cartels are involved in some way, and that has actually fueled a stereotypical view, and that's why people are so scared of the border. And it's all designed to try to downplay the national emergency that it is, and it has been for years. It's an economic emergency as well as the safety of the American people, the safety of the people that are crossing Mexico thinking that they're going to get to come here. You're putting those lives at risk as well. But let's be clear here. The number one lives that the president needs to worry about are ours. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Back in a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, here we are. Welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. And we want to welcome, as always, we got Mr. Dan Sullivan back with us in studio. Thanks, Dan.
Hi, Paul. Glad to be here.
How was your Christmas and your New Year?
Had a really good one.
Good.
I retired in December of last year, so I've had a relaxing year and really an opportunity to dig into legislative issues more. Study a little bit more about the upcoming session,
Yep.
And I'm ready to go.
Good. Yes, I can. Sorry, I'm going to turn your microphone up. Okay, so let's talk about the session. What are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm personally going to run probably more legislation than I've run in the past. Usually, I have just 2 or 3 bills I'm really behind. I've got 6 or 7 right now, and all of them are geared towards reducing regulation, cutting our spending, and
Let's face it, times are tough for the Arkansas General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, so let's do a flashback here. We have time for this. This is President Bill Clinton juxtaposed to, well, it's not really juxtaposition. Here's Barack Obama. They actually agree on immigration back when they were
programs
president.
Where we're spending.
So take a look at this. Here it is, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama on immigration. Listen to this.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace, as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws.
Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. When I took office, I committed to fixing this broken immigration system. And I began by doing what I could to secure our borders. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. There are actions I have the legal authority to take as president. Tonight, I'm announcing those actions. We'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel, so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half-century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, question my authority, question my authority, question my authority, question my authority, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill.
Well, that may be a little piece of audio that we need to revisit later in the broadcast. Can you believe that? I mean, really and truly, it's like, okay, Democrats, they want to fix the illegal immigration problem. They want to fix border security, but But not a wall. I mean, we don't want to actually add to the barriers that we have down there. Like, we don't want to put a physical. Are you crazy? Don't want to put a physical barrier down there. What do you think? Should Donald Trump declare a national emergency and access Department of Defense funding to build this thing?
A lot of money and not really getting a lot out of it. You know, a good example is the all-payer claim system. Senator Sanders, David Sanders, ran it a few years ago, our last session, and it failed in the House, failed in the Senate, failed in the House again, passed in the Senate, and then passed in the House. And we're spending millions of dollars, and there are no outcomes. They're supposed to be studying how we can save money on health care, if you can believe that. But I'm not aware of any recommendations or any data that they've produced that actually save us money. And I think we spend anywhere from $3 to $10 or $12 million. And there have to be multiple programs just like that if legislators will dig in, we can find ways to cut the waste, cut the spending, and reduce the size of government.
Okay, so this particular program, say this again, this was something to try to find, you spend money to try to find savings, and we don't ever find savings. We just spend the money.
We just spend the money, right. And it's not that it's a bad idea. The concept is a good concept. Let's really study the data. And I'm all for that. However, we are cutting services to our disabled. We're cutting services to some of our elder programs. We are holding flat spending on things like our senior centers. So it's really how we prioritize how we spend the money. It's not just cutting for cutting's sake. It's saying, here are the important things. Here's where we need to be spending money. And let's make sure we're prioritizing appropriately.
What was your reaction? I don't think we've talked to you since we had, I think it was in the middle of December, we had the news that there were going to be massive cuts to reimbursements in the Medicaid, in the traditional Medicaid program. These cuts were forecast kind of back in 2015, but it's only now that they're being
you
realized.
Had some excellent points on that, Paul. You know, that the governor had said that in order to fund Medicaid expansion, we necessarily are going to have to find savings.
Right.
Well, the real word for that is cuts, and that's not a bad thing necessarily, but we cut from the people who most need our services and who we as legislators should hold as a priority. So, you know, we're paying, I think, $138 million now for the expansion. Next year, in this budget we're going to pass, we'll be paying $68 million. And the following year, $219 million. That money comes right out of the budget and is going to able-bodied, working-age adults with no kids, and rather than prioritize the people who are most important.
It's absolutely, it's interesting that this is kind of where we are. It's 2019 now, and the bill, I guess, has come due.
Yeah,
is that really what's going?
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go. 870-275-9799. Jackie on Facebook. Hashtags Build the Wall. Amy on Facebook. Build the Wall Now. Hashtag Build the Wall Now. A lot of people are really focusing in on this issue. Interestingly enough, the Supreme Court is going to vote this week. The United States Supreme Court will vote this week on whether to fast-track the DACA appeal. The Supreme Court could announce, according to Ken Kuklowski, as early as Friday, that it will hear arguments on whether President Donald Trump has the legal authority to end DACA. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, this is one of the reasons, according to President Trump himself, that the negotiations over the DACA deal basically broke down last time. It's because a judge out of nowhere said that Barack Obama had the authority to unilaterally act outside of Congress's authority. to basically, grant this stay of deportations, everything else for the Dreamers, or this, legal, basically creating a legal status where there was no authority. President Obama did not have the constitutional authority to do DACA. He didn't. Everybody knows it except for this judge in the Ninth Circuit, or the Ninth Circuit. So it was a big surprise. Well, the Supreme Court, hopefully, let's hope the Supreme Court does hear it. Well, there's actually another angle to all of this, okay? Because President Trump knows this. Can you imagine if the Supreme Court does not decide to hear the DACA appeal? So that essentially, if they don't decide to hear it, then the lower court ruling stands. And essentially what that ruling says is, President Obama had the authority to do what he did, and President Trump doesn't have the authority to undo it. Well, take the personalities out, take the individuals out, take President Trump out, take President Obama out. Let's just talk about the power of the president constitutionally under the executive branch. Well, you realize now President Trump has a whole lot of power if he wants to. And he's aware of this, by the way. Joel Pollack over at Breitbart, Trump gives the media a long overdue lesson about the Constitution. Joel Pollack writes, President Donald Trump gave a long overdue lesson to the White House press corps about the Constitution's limits on executive power. Limits the media largely ignored under Barack Obama because they agreed with Obama's policies and wished to see him succeed politically. Trump pointed out that Democrats lost interest in negotiating over the future of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program when a judge in San Francisco ruled last year that the Trump administration's decision to cancel the policy was unlawful. Republicans have always considered DACA unconstitutional because Obama created it in defiance of Congress. Boy, I jumped when that happened. I was like, what's going on? In defiance of Congress, and because he did so by extending his powers of prosecutorial discretion to an unprecedented number of cases, numbering nearly 1 million beneficiaries. Barack Obama himself believed, now here's the thing, Barack Obama himself believed that it was unconstitutional. He said so many times that he didn't have the authority to do what he did with DACA. A former representative, Louis Gutierrez, a Democrat from Illinois, documented in his 2013 memoir that Obama, quote, had been telling the entire immigrant rights community for nearly a year and a half he couldn't do it. Nevertheless, amnesty activists tried and failed to push Obama to act until Republicans, Senator Marco Rubio in particular, threatened to outflank him. According to Joel Pollack, after Congress rejected Democrats' proposals for a DREAM Act that would eventually grant citizenship to illegal aliens brought to the country as minors, Rubio proposed a more moderate bill that looked likely to pass with Republican support. Some of the activists say they are open to Rubio's effort. This was reported in the Washington Post during that time. Rather than face the political setback of having to sign or veto a Republican bill to help Dreamers and risk Latino support, Obama decided to declare DACA, which critics called the DREAM Act by fiat. When Trump's first Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, announced the end of DACA, he noted the Trump administration believed the policy had always been unconstitutional, saying, quote, the executive branch through DACA deliberately sought to achieve what the legislative branch specifically refused to authorize on multiple occasions. Such an open-ended circumvention of immigration laws was an unconstitutional exercise of authority by the executive branch. But the media never showed much interest in whether DACA was constitutional or not. Instead, they focused on how ending DACA might harm the Dreamers, who were often portrayed in glowing terms as patriotic, high-achieving Americans in all but name. At the same time, Joel Pollack writes, they have often speculated or even presumed that President Trump is an authoritarian leader who would do anything to protect and increase his power. Now think about that for a second. At the same time, they're not interested in whether or not it's constitutional, but they are interested in saying that President Trump is a fascist, totalitarian, Nazi, KGB agent, loyal to the Saudi Arabian government, that sort of thing. We just keep adding to the list of the things that he is. Now, on Friday, President Trump pointed out that DACA was unconstitutional once again. And he said that if the Supreme Court disagreed by rejecting the Trump administration's appeal to the lower court's decision, it would be giving him potentially, listen to this, unlimited power. This is what happens when your media is not principled. So what happens when your media is political and doesn't just report the facts. This is President Trump. This is his quote here. We discussed DACA a long time ago. He said, you remember those discussions. But where it really ended is when the judge ruled against the cancellation of DACA. And it was, I said as soon as it happened, because that was a shocking decision. It was shocking to the Democrats. It was more shocking to the Republicans. It was an incorrect decision. It was a political decision made by a judge. And I know a lot of people don't like it when I say it, but try going there sometime to the Ninth Circuit and try winning a case. It's not easy. Everybody files right in the Ninth Circuit. The fact is, it was a terrible decision and an incorrect decision. Trump went on. When that decision came down, when the judge ruled the way he ruled, I said, as soon as I heard it, I said, you know what's going to happen? You're never going to hear from them again, meaning the Democrats in negotiation. And that's exactly what broke up the DACA deal. Yes, we had a pathway to citizenship. We had many things. That was getting close to being a deal. We were getting close. And as soon as that decision came down, that incorrect, horrible decision, there's been a number of them made lately, but I said you'll never hear from them again. I call up, I say, hi, it's President Trump. What's going on? They say, President Trump, we don't know who that is. It was over. The deal was over. He goes on. That's what killed the DACA deal. It was nothing else. It was the judge's decision. And if the Supreme Court does what really everyone thinks from a legal standpoint it should be doing, if they don't allow the President of the United States, which is me also, because if President Obama is allowed to do that, I'm allowed to do it also. Can you imagine? If the Supreme Court overrules that wrong executive order by Obama, we'll have a deal very quickly on DACA and other things. And the Democrats want that, and so do we. But once he ruled that way, it was something you couldn't really negotiate, end quote. I know that's a long statement, but back when that happened, folks, I told you that the Democrats made a decision to not negotiate it because they didn't want Trump to actually solve the problem, and they wanted the Dreamer kids to stay victims a little bit longer so that they can manipulate them for continued political power. Joel Pollack goes on and says Trump's description of the case pointed out the problem that Democrats and the media overlooked in 2012, namely that if Obama were allowed to expand his executive powers by ignoring all constraints, including Congress, a future Republican president could do the same. He also set a trap for his critics. If they disagreed with his description of the constitutional problem with DACA, they are forced to trust him with the same sweeping authority they applauded under Obama, and to accept that he may not be the tyrant they have portrayed after all. Though one might object to Trump signaling to the court which way it ought to rule on a constitutional question, he's hardly the first president to do so. Obama, for example, did it in 2012 when he urged the court to uphold Obamacare, arguing bizarrely that it was a duly constituted law. How ironic that Obama, lauded by the media for being a professor of constitutional law, would imply he did not believe in the power of judicial review, while Trump, treated as some kind of fascist in the media, would appeal to the constitutional restraints of his own power. Joel Pollack, again, senior editor-at-large at Breitbart News. Really, really good piece. Matter of fact, the most interesting piece that I read all weekend on the national issues was this piece. Now, I just want to say here, what we're talking about here, and this is one of the reasons government grows. And I don't think it's any question here that this is happening in the context of immigration, which is essentially an argument about whether or not we are a nation of laws or whether we are a nation of men, meaning capricious men whose, opinions might change with the wind. But the law as written, you have to enforce it. I don't think it's any question that's, to me, it's not even a coincidence that in the context of that issue, you have Obama who acted outside of the Constitution. And if this doesn't get corrected, if the DACA executive order doesn't get called what it is unconstitutional, then you've now grown what the government can do. You've now grown the executive branch even more outside of what it was originally intended. Now, this can happen as well at all levels of government. I hearken back to what happened in Arkansas when Governor Asa Hutchinson used a line item veto trick that many thought was unconstitutional in order to get around the 75% majorities he needed in both chambers of the legislature in order to spend money on Obamacare Medicaid expansion. And a lot of people thought what he did was unconstitutional and that there was going to be a challenge about it. There never was a challenge, but they came back after in another session and made sure they re-upped the program with a simple majority. And they did that, I think, in case there was a lawsuit on whether or not what the governor did at the time was legal. Now, there was a lot of Democrats that were very happy back when Asa Hutchinson did this line item veto maneuver. They were happy. Matter of fact, they voted against a program they loved, hoping that Asa would keep his word and line item veto it, right? If you remove the Republican-Democrat thing out of the equation, that sets a precedent, doesn't it? Doesn't that set a precedent? I mean, it's all well and good now because, the big government people got what they want. They got to keep their government program. But is it possible that in the future, when there's maybe a governor who maybe wants to shrink the size of government, that he tries the same thing? Well, it's already been done once before. Why couldn't it be done again, but using the maneuver to shrink the size of government? Just think about it. Think about the precedent it sets. My point is, we have laws for a reason, and the laws are supposed to keep government predictable. It's supposed to, and that's to the benefit of its citizens. I really do hope the Supreme Court decides on Friday to take up this issue, because it is a big deal as to whether or not President Obama had the authority to do what he did, and whether or not Jeff Sessions had the authority to say we're not going to do this anymore, or President Trump had the authority to say we're not going to do this anymore because it was unconstitutional. Yeah, it might affect people negatively, but that's see, if there are bad consequences, that's what gives people the motivation to maybe go back to your legislative branch and try to change things and fix the problem. Anyway, the number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Lindsey Graham, no progress on the shutdown because the radical left sees the border security as racist. If you listen to the Friday program, the Johnny Cash Friday program, this is essentially exactly what I said. Lindsey Graham saying the same thing on Sunday. Listen to this.
We're having to negotiate with people who want to abolish ICE, not support ICE. We're having to negotiate with people who see the Border Patrol agents gassing children rather than defending our borders as professional law enforcement officers. And we're negotiating with people who will give us $1 for the wall, even though it's immoral, and accuse all of us who support a wall as part of border security as racist. As long as the radical left is in charge, we're never going to get anywhere. The president will compromise, but he will not capitulate. So that's where we're at.
All right.
But the people in
Senator
the room
Lindsey
are your
Graham.
colleagues.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. All of these guys, including the clip we played, President Obama, President Clinton, they all supported border security. They've all voted for fences, essentially, generally speaking. The Democrat Party, they've all voted for barriers of some kind in the past. And now all of a sudden they can't. And the reason they can't is because their base, and maybe even more than their base, now think the only reason the Republicans want a wall is because they're racist. And so now we have a government shutdown essentially over racism. Think about that. We have a government shutdown over perceived social motivations and racial motivations. That's why the government is shut down right now. And politics. They don't want President Trump to actually deliver what he campaigned on, because that would actually be somebody getting something done. They really can't have that. I mean, so it's also, just generally politics, but it's just crazy to me. I think more and more people are figuring that out as well, though. I think a lot more people are outraged by this. So this may end up being a pretty big political win. I don't know. But here's the other thing. Back to the national emergency. You're putting President Trump in a situation where it's very easy to argue that his job as commander-in-chief is to execute the laws in the most basic way possible. The most basic premise of any country is to know who is coming in and out of your country. That's the most basic premise. Now, I know the mainstream media tried to tell us that accusing George Soros of there's a new caravan coming up, and accusing George Soros, the last time this happened, of contributing to funding this crisis and the caravan and everything else, they started to tell, well, you can't say that because you're anti-Semitic. If you criticize George Soros, you're an anti-Semite, which is not true, and it's a contrived argument. It's a way to shut people up, which makes me think even more that George Soros is behind this, when they're now all of a sudden out of nowhere you're an anti-Semite if you mention George Soros. It's very easily, he's a far left-wing guy. He's a big globalist guy. I mean, this is what he does. He wants to hurt and attack the sovereignty of the country. If you could, honestly, if you've got one person who's outside of our country who is coordinating all of this and actually creating a national emergency, at what point is that somebody coordinating an invasion? At what point is that a national emergency? And you talk about that even before we talk about the violence on the border, the drugs on the border, and the human and sex trafficking on the border. And the left says they've got the moral high ground. They're the compassionate ones. They're the ones that say it's immoral to have a wall. No, it's immoral to not have a wall. Don't you understand? It's immoral to not. You're breaking the social contract that Americans have with their own government. Now, if you want to change that contract, then once again, pass a bill out of Congress. Oh, wait, you can't. So this is all about whether or not we're going to be a nation of laws or just a nation that doesn't care about our laws. And you can cast all kinds of motivations and dispersions on President Trump, but as far as the legality goes of what he's arguing, I mean, even if you're not a Trump supporter, this is the silver lining, which I am a Trump supporter, but the silver lining is President Trump is trying to actually restore law and order when it comes to this big issue that's been overlooked for decades. We're going to take a break. This is Conduit News Radio. Back in a minute.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense?
All Americans.
Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. 888-848-9999. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
On here.
Exactly, and we all knew that. That wasn't a surprise. People admitted they wanted the money now. You know, and for example, our people in education, our teachers, you know, that money, rather than going to our schools, we have to hold budgets flat. We have to hold other budgets flat or cut money. You know, I think you had this clip also. The director of DHS said that we'll have to come back later and find additional savings to pay for Medicaid expansion. So it's still a big deal. I doubt if we're going to be able to walk that back this session. You know, what's done is done. We're going to have to find other more free market answers to save the money. You know, I've fought for 2 years now to have telehealth incorporated, pardon me, to have advanced practice nurse legislation passed. And for the first time, the governor has weighed in supporting advanced practice nurses.
That's good.
Yeah, he hasn't done so officially.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws.
Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. When I took office, I committed to fixing this broken immigration system, and I began by doing what I could to secure our borders. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. There are actions I have the legal authority to take as president. Tonight, I'm announcing those actions. We'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half-century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, question my authority, question my authority, question my authority, question my authority, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill.
Stop. All right. Well, that's it for the second hour. First hour. We'll have one more hour coming your way next. Don't go anywhere, folks. Back in a minute.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
What on here?
Exactly, and we all knew that. That wasn't a surprise. People admitted they wanted the money now. You know, and for example, our people in education, our teachers, you know, that money, rather than going to our schools, we have to hold budgets flat. We have to hold other budgets flat or cut money. You know, I think you had this clip also. The director of DHS said that we'll have to come back later and find additional savings to pay for Medicaid expansion. So it's still a big deal. I doubt if we're going to be able to walk that back this session. You know, what's done is done. We're going to have to find other more free market answers to save the money. Mm-hmm. You know, I've fought for 2 years now to have telehealth incorporated, pardon me, to have advanced practice nurse legislation passed. And for the first time, the governor has weighed in supporting advanced practice nurses.
That's good.
Yeah, he hasn't done so officially, but we passed legislation that allows advanced practice nurses to be a primary care provider in a behavioral health facility. So if it works for them, it ought to work for all the people and give people some choice. You know, as you're aware, my slogan for my campaign and the way I kind of look at my election and what the people elected me to do is from God to us, life and liberty. And I've really focused on issues of liberty, giving people an opportunity to make choices, to own their own health care decisions, to own their own education decisions, and allow them the freedom to choose, which I think in the long run will save money.
Absolutely. And the whole idea behind the telehealth thing, I think, is fantastic. When you think about, I mean, you know, when you think about the last time you've been to the doctor, you know, a lot of times, you know what you got. You know, you know, oh gosh, okay, I've got another sinus infection or something like that, and but you've got to kind of go through the.
Yeah, and you know what it is, Paul? It's allowing people to practice their craft, their profession, to the full extent of their license. And if they are trained, if we got nurses over here at ASU that's training them, and they can go to another state and be allowed to practice to the full scope of their licensure, they should be allowed to do that in Arkansas. And Arkansas just is much more restrictive on many, many healthcare choices. You know, it's very unusual for our hospitals to compete against each other. Mm-hmm. And what does that do to price? Mm-hmm. That causes prices to go up.
Yeah.
And same thing in education. You know, until we have a good, competitive, free market in education and allow educational choice and allow people, you know, the Bible talks about the first responsibility, or one of the responsibilities of parents is their child's education. And the parent is responsible for that. Our Constitution talks about that also, about parents and families being responsible for education. And right now their choices are limited. Mm-hmm. So we're going to try. I know some things will come up this session.
I was about to go into school choice, you know, because if we flash back a couple of years ago, it was Jim Dotson's bill, right?
Yes.
So he had a bill that it was a school choice oriented bill, but it was pretty limited, you know, considering what I think a lot of people want to see eventually come out of school choice. But it was a good bill. It was.
I'm sure some people disagreed with you.
Well,
on that.
No. Yeah,
it got scaled way back.
Yeah, okay.
You know, we started out being a little more offering great choice and giving a kind of a pilot program. Then it got scaled back and eventually didn't pass. You know, I have a meeting tomorrow that I think is one of the preeminent people in our state on school finance. I think she's listening now. But I'm going to meet with her to learn more about the overall how our schools are funded and where the money needs to go and how difficult the bureaucracy has become in funding our schools and getting the money where it needs to go.
Yeah.
It's just incredible how difficult it is. And a lot of it is not state regs. A lot of it is federal regs. You know, in order to get the money, you have to jump through the hoops. And jumping through the hoops costs a lot of money. And it's just very bureaucratic and very complex. I know a little bit about it, having been a former educator, but I need to really dive down into the cost side and where the money goes and what we can do to get money to our teachers. A lot of people will be surprised at how much discretion our school boards have. You know, and I've asked many of the teachers, and I hope you have a lot listening, and people, our general population.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Here we go, hour number two. Thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate all of you guys out there listening to the program, listening and watching. We're also broadcasting over at conduitnews.com, as well as our Facebook channel, facebook.com/Conduit News, the YouTube channel, which is just Conduit News. You can subscribe to that. Click the little bell to receive notifications. When you do that, as part of helping us build the Liberty Machine, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel and you click the little bell to receive notifications, when we have interviews and things like that, or special segments that we cut out from the 2-hour broadcast, we'll make smaller clips, and those smaller clips get uploaded to YouTube. You get a notification, and if it's a good way to send information. A lot of times people don't have. I know you're not supposed to say this, but a lot of times people don't have 2 hours to listen. I mean, they got to go out and feed their families. All right, they don't have 2 hours, but they might have 15 minutes. They might have 5 minutes. And so you can help us if you're a fan of what we are doing, if you're a fan of what we're trying to do, then subscribing to the YouTube channel is one of the best ways you can help us do it, because once we put up the smaller videos, it's up to you. You can post them on your own social media. You can share them with your friends in a text message or whatever. If it's something that is newsworthy to you and you think other people that may not be listening need to hear. Again, the telephone number to call or text, 870-275-9799. All right. Very interesting piece, to say the least. Very interesting piece yesterday in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. It is a piece by Michael Wickline on the relationship between Asa Hutchinson, the governor, and his nephew, Jim Hendren, the president pro temp of the Senate. The headline, "For New Arkansas Senate Leader, Politics is in the Blood." Subheadline, "He, governor, are kin, but can disagree." What an odd subheadline. So he and the governor are kin, but can disagree. Now, the only reason you would put a subheadline like that, will you scroll up? Scroll up. I want people to see this subheadline. The only reason you would have a subheadline like this is if there were people who believe that doesn't happen. You understand what you got to understand? You understand what happens. Obviously, if you have to point out that they can have disagreements, then there are some people that think that they don't. Or the natural human tendency would be to think that family relations are thicker than politics. You know what I'm saying? That there's more of a family loyalty there, and that loyalty is going to dictate what you do, because you got to see people at Christmas or Thanksgiving or wherever, right? I don't know how they divide their time up. I know, most people go one or the other. Anyway. So that's that's the first thing that stuck out to me. Why the motivation? First of all, why do you even need to write this piece? Well, because Senator Hendren is, he's the president pro temp of the Senate and just so happens to also be the governor's nephew. I actually have said before that it's very likely that, Senator Hendren being the president pro temp of the Senate very much undermines the integrity of the body in terms of being a separate and equal branch of government. In a lot of ways, the Arkansas Senate may very well be a member of the executive branch now, at least for the time being. And that's the danger here. This article goes out of its way to make sure that you know that these two, while they are related, can have disagreements, which means, because this article has been written, that they're now above reproach. That is the goal of an article like this. Matter of fact, scroll down to the very bottom, Joe. Full disclosure, I have no idea who wrote these comments. We have a commenter on this is on the Gazette's website yesterday at 12:17. Somebody writes puff piece, and then somebody named Foghorn writes, quote, "Oh, for the love of God, how stupid do they think we are?" When it comes to, a piece like this, a lot of people scratching their head like, what is this? Now, let's see. Michael Wickline writes, during the past 6 years, he served as a Senate Republican Majority Leader as co-chairman of 3 legislative task forces that recommended changes for public schools, state employees, health insurance programs, the Medicaid program, and the tax code. Now, folks, if you've been following politics at all, it is an objective fact that the reason that Senator Hendren was picked to be the head of those task forces is because he's the governor's nephew. That's the reason he was picked, is because it led the parade where the governor wanted the parade led. It's not even arguable. It's not even arguable. It's a way to set the goalposts where the goalposts want to be, or set the Overton window. The last 4 years in this state, we have governed by task forces, which is legislatively, and again, I don't see how you can argue the point. It's a lot easier to control and lobby 15 people on a task force than it is to lobby 135 legislators that are in session, that want to deal with the problem and debate the problem now. If you, let's just be clear here, okay? 100% certain, if you didn't have a task force, if you didn't have all these task forces, and you literally just left the sausage making up to a 135-member body and let the chips fall where they may, we would have demonstrably different results right now than we do in terms of the policies, laws that we're living under. Period. 100% chance. The task forces are a way to subdue an otherwise active and imaginative and creative legislature that want to actively and proactively solve problems for the people, whether I agree with some of their motivations or disagree or what, that doesn't matter. The bottom line is there's example after example after example where legislators have ideas. Even legislators in the establishment have ideas. They want to try to get something done, and they get Johnny sweep the legs out from under them, and it gets put in a task force where Jim Hendren is the chair and the head, and everything is steered the way the governor, what is most appropriate or more appropriate to the governor. And, this article cites, well, no, they disagreed. The governor wanted a 4-year tax plan, and they recommended a 3-year. Do you really think they care either way? Do you really think in the grand scheme of things it matters? No, like I said, the goalposts are set where they are. Okay, let's keep going here. There's a lot of good things. Now, he actually addresses this. Let's see here. Quote, clearly there was a concern about me being pro temp, Hendren said. Wickline writes, senators voted in March to choose him as president pro temp-elect after the Senate Republican caucus voted to nominate him over Senator Jimmy Hickey, Republican Texarkana. Quote, is it too much power in one family, and am I going to just hurt the independence of the legislature versus the executive branch? Clearly, most of the Senate didn't agree with that because they know me, and I guarantee the governor knows me, and the family relationship is very important. or otherwise, I would just interject here. Maybe the rest of the Senate that voted for you knows the governor. Maybe it's not so much about knowing you, Senator Hendren. Maybe it's more about the rest of those. Like they saw what happened to Linda Collins Smith and Brian King. You think that might have something to do with it? Maybe just a little bit. Let's see. Keeps going. Hendren said that in some ways having the relationship, meaning uncle and nephew, that he has with Hutchinson makes it easier for him to tell the governor when I think he is doing something not great. No, not wrong, but not great. Or when I disagree with him. And believe me, that has occurred many times, but it occurs in private. Sometimes we work it out. Sometimes I don't support what he's doing, or he won't support something that I am doing, but we have the kind of relationship where we laugh about it, and we don't take it personal. I've got some frustration from the governor as well about my stubbornness, but we have tremendous respect for each other, I think. All right. Then Wickline talks about Governor Mike Beebe. Former Democratic Governor Mike Beebe was asked about the relationship between nephew Hendren and Uncle Hutchinson, and he said this, quote, I think they were philosophically aligned, notwithstanding their relationship. Beebe described Hendren as level-headed, objective, pragmatic, and pleasant to deal with when Beebe was governor. Democrat Senator Joyce Elliott says of Jim Hendren and the relative situation, I don't make much of it because none of us get to choose our relatives. All of us might have chosen differently if we were choosing who our mothers and dads may be. So that's part of who Jim is. He can't help that. He can't change that, meaning he can't change who his uncle is. And then there's a quote here. Michael Wickline reached out to Brenda Vassar-Taylor. And, of course, Brenda is the co-founder of the Conduit organizations, and you're listening right now to Conduit News Radio. She says that they have disagreed with Hendren and Hutchinson about Arkansas's version, or Wickline writes that we've disagreed with Medicaid expansion. Quote, she said Hendren is military-minded. Now, keep in mind, Senator Hendren is a colonel in the Arkansas Air National Guard. She said Hendren is military-minded. Quote, he is used to following the directions of the commander, and I believe the governor is the person he takes directions from. It's not a personal attack, end quote. But Hendren said, quote, Brenda doesn't understand the military mindset, end quote, which he said supports the Constitution and accomplishes the mission without violating their oaths as officers. Vassar-Taylor said she hopes that Hendren is successful at improving the integrity of the Senate. She said she is glad that he persuaded fellow senators to authorize video streaming meetings of that body and its committee starting this session. I wholeheartedly agree about both of those things, the integrity of the Senate and the streaming. That's a big deal. The fact that the Senate is now going to be streaming their committee meetings and their with video so we can keep an eye on them is a big deal. That is an accomplishment. Whether you agree on that issue or disagree on other wherever you fall down, that is a good thing, and credit needs to be given where credit is due there. Then Michael Wickline goes on and talks about Senator Jeremy Hutchinson. That's the governor's other nephew being indicted on 12 counts of wire and tax fraud, and then the other lawmakers, and how the integrity of the Senate is in question here. It really, truly is. And whether or not they can police themselves, I don't think so. I don't really think they can police themselves because they could have been policing themselves this entire time. There needs to be, new, I would say here, new laws that don't oppress the people, but actually make it harder for legislators to, for example, be an attorney, represent clients before the legislature, but having the loopholes that they have, passing bills for clients as an attorney and getting paid extra money to do it. That certainly is one of the biggest problems that we've seen, and it's been slowly unveiled over the last couple of years. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. The idea that this whole article, by the way, again, it's trying to defend a perception that must already be out there. I want you to understand me clearly here. The fact that this is the subject of the article is, yeah, they're related, yeah, they're family, yeah, they're uncle and nephew, yeah, one's in the executive branch and one's the head of, one half of 1/3 of the legislative branch. Don't worry. They disagree sometimes. That, to me, says that there's already a perception out there, or there might be in the coming legislative battles that are going to start next Monday, that there's going to be possibly some credibility problems, that there's going to be some things happen that might be described as just formalities because we already have this familiar relationship, and so it's going to be more of a dog and pony show. I'm just saying how that perception must already be out there, or you wouldn't have an article like this being written. And the other point of view, by the way, the criticism is in the subheadline. The criticism is already there. And then they get to, Brenda Vassar-Taylor's quote here that says, we think he's military-minded and he's just used to following directions from a commander, and I believe that's what he's doing. In this context, the governor is the commanding officer. Again, that is taking the subheadline and making it more of a specific criticism. But if you actually read the first half of the article before you ever even get to this quote, it's clear that there's already people out there talking, and I've been one of them, certainly, that, the independence of the Arkansas Senate, everything, and this is my point is, unfortunately, yeah, you can't help who your relatives are, but sometimes just for the perception of things, you have to bow out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this article wouldn't even be necessary if Jim Henry wasn't the president pro temp of the Senate. You understand what I mean? So everything they do, the fact that they had to write an article like this, means that everything they do is going to be potentially scrutinized where the fix is in. And the only reason this is happening is because of he's the uncle and he's the nephew. It just is what it is. And the mainstream media, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and others, every time they mention Jim Henry and every time they mention Asa Hutchinson in the same story, they rightfully so point out that the two are related because you have to. Anyway. Very interesting piece. I actually think the fact that it was written at all means that there's a lot of people out there questioning what this does to the makeup of the Arkansas Senate in terms of their independence from the executive branch. We'll be back in a moment.
They need to go to their school board meetings. People need to engage locally. And find out what their school board knows and what their school board, what the choices that the school board has and what they're doing with their state's money.
Yeah. And on the school choice subject, back to that bill, it ended up being controversial because you did have the, these entrenched education forces, a lot of superintendents across the state were warning, they're saying this is a bad bill and everything else. And I know that you had several public forums or a couple public forums where, you were not afraid to just engage and talk about the ideas I think some people weren't even wanting to listen to those ideas, and so we may have some of those obstacles again, right?
Absolutely, and I think it's a good thing to listen to people. It's a good thing to have those forums, and I'm always willing to engage our public and engage our people in.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst. How are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal.
Ethics.
Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Going to end here on this segment of this talking about this strange article that was written to defend the relationship between governor and nephew in the Arkansas Senate and the governor's mansion, saying that everything's fine here. There's no conflict of interest or anything like that, or there's not going to be any nepotism-like results. Nepotism is not the right word here, but you get the point, right? Somebody saying, what do they ever disagree on? So Senator Hendren says that he does disagree with the governor, but he does it in private. Okay, so what do they ever disagree on? I got a text message here. Well, the fact is we don't know, because he says, right? Now, if you're a public office holder and you disagree with somebody, shouldn't you make that public? Matter of fact, saying that you have disagreements, trust us, I know we're uncle and nephew, but we have disagreements, trust us, but we have them in private. Well, why? Is that because you're family members? If you weren't family members, would you still have them in private? At what point, okay, let's say maybe you would have some of your disagreements in private, but at what point would you ever make them public? And the fact that you're uncle and nephew, would that mean that your patience would be a little bit more extended before you make a public statement critical of something that your uncle is doing, and vice versa? Come on, everybody's got family out there. We all know how we feel about our family members. So the fact that the article is written at all, once again, oh, by the way, here's the last part of the article I'll read to you today, Michael Wickline. Invariably, political observers wonder whether whoever serves as Senate President pro temp or House Speaker will run for higher office in the future. At least a few of them at the state capitol have privately asked whether Hendren is interested in running for governor. Okay, is that the real reason that you're asking the question now, or is it because he's the nephew? It's because he's the nephew. In this case, not because he's President pro temp of the Senate, it's because he's the nephew, and he's the uncle. Quote, I don't know that any politician can truly say they have never thought about what they are going to run for in the upcoming elections. There may be some who say, I never want to be anything else but this, but I don't know what I'm going to do. That's where I am right now. But have I thought about running for other offices? Sure, but I have not made any decision, and I don't know for certain what I want to do. So, Jim Hendren running for governor. That would certainly be an interesting primary between the Lieutenant Governor, Tim Griffin. We'll be back in just a moment.
Any issues that they're concerned about. That's why I'm meeting tomorrow with someone who's an expert in the funding formula.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the debate. I think it's a good debate, and it's what our Constitution calls for.
Yeah. Well, and this is an issue that certainly is in the Republican platform. And it's also something that originally it was interesting how it was a bipartisan thing. If you look at the movement, the school choice movement, across the country. Originally, it was something where, you had Democrats who were saying, listen, the inner cities need more choice.
Yeah, Paul, it's very similar in a smaller way to what's going on in the national scene. It's not about right and wrong. It's about who wins and who loses politically. And I can't allow my opponent to have a political win. That's what we're seeing on the national scene now. Everybody agrees on border security. Everybody agrees on those kind of issues, but people don't want people to have a win. And I think that's a little bit similar to what's going on in Arkansas politics. We have to be careful about who wins and who loses, and the constituents then become a secondary issue.
Yeah,
and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and then it just makes people get frustrated with, well, nothing gets done, and then they disconnect, and they're like, well, it doesn't matter. You talk about people getting involved locally. A lot of people get jaded, Dan, and they think, well, it doesn't matter who is in office because it's not, my life's not really going to change either way, and that's not true. That's just not true.
You're exactly right, and I really wish our constituents would get engaged. A great example of that, Paul, is the Patriots of Act 746.
Yeah.
Started out as just a very small group of people who really got engaged. And now, what are there, 13 or 15,000
17,000 last time I looked.
People engaged in that group, and now they have branched out into a new freedom.
Yeah, the Arkansas Liberty Coalition.
Liberty Coalition, and now that's growing. So it's an excellent example of what can happen on the local level when just a few people have the passion to be energized and re-engage with their government, and it starts at the local level.
Well, so tell me about that. You've been to some of the meetings, right? The Patriots Fact 746 meetings.
Absolutely.
They invite legislators there. What do you think about the material that's being presented?
Well, I'm fully supportive. I mean, one of the things it does for me as a legislator, it gives me people that I can talk to who are experts in areas where I'm not an expert. And the people that are leading that group, if I have questions about what they believe and what they're not, about their knowledge level on a specific issue, I have someone to call. And then I have a larger group that I can go get feedback from and see what that constituency feels like. It's not a lot different than the group I met with of teachers at Brookland High School.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. We got a special guest I want to introduce you to. Welcome to the program. We have Mr. John Milkovich. Is that how you say your name, John Milkovich?
Well, you know what, Paul? We'll go with Milkovich. That's what I've used most of my life. There you go.
Okay.
You hammered. You nailed it that time.
All right, John Milkovich. Now, you are a Democrat state senator serving in the state of Louisiana, correct?
That's correct, Paul. Yes, sir.
Okay, so you also have this new book, and this is why I think it's fascinating. This is why I wanted to have you on. Your new book entitled Robert Mueller, Errand Boy for the New World Order. I don't think many people would think a Democrat senator from Louisiana would write a book like that. What made you want to write the book, sir?
Well, listen, we're Christians first, we're patriots next, and we're for the success of our country and our family and freedom. Robert Mueller is a dangerous individual, and I started studying him, and I was a little bit interested in the fact that we have an outsider, maverick, cowboy in Montana. We would call him a Bronx stomper. I'm from Montana. President, and we've got all of these proponents of socialism and the establishment deep state insiders, the Bushes, the Obamas, the Clintons, and Robert Mueller against him. I thought, something's not right here. Started to investigate and found that journalists and researchers and federal agents were writing articles and doing research on the different scandals that Robert Mueller has been involved in, actively involved in. And I said, someone needs to go ahead and write an article that ties all of these scandals together, because if you go back over the last 30 years, Robert Mueller's been in the middle of cover-up after collusion, after corruption, after somebody needs to pull it together. And make long story short, I thought I was writing an article. It turned into a book. There's a ton of documented evidence. Robert Mueller is not an honest man.
So talk about the title of the book, An Errand Boy for the New World Order. What does that mean?
Well, he is the go-to guy for the globalists, for the establishment, the deep state, the insiders. We have to realize that, and I think you do, that President Trump is an absolute outsider. He wants to preserve America's freedom, independence, and sovereignty, but there's forces that want to drag America down. They want to drag us down with weaponized immigration, bringing people into our country that want to bomb, not build. They want to drag our country down with trade deals in which America magically comes in last in every single trade deal that we enter in. There's people that want to make Americans subject to the rules of the United Nations and the regulations that globalist bankers would like to put. There's people that want to take away our right to defend ourselves under the Second Amendment, want to take away our First Amendment right. President Trump, whether you agree with everything he does or not, he has stood for American freedom and independence and sovereignty. He's standing up against weaponized immigration. He is standing against taking away our constitutional rights. He's standing against the trade deals that have been used to help trash the American economy.
I mean this in jest, but when you sit at in the lunchroom with the Democrats in Louisiana, are you by yourself? Are you alone?
Sometimes, and really, I would like to think that in the Louisiana Senate, the political party is not as important. And then, it's not for me. We were very clear when we ran that we were running on Bible principles and in the United States Constitution. But Paul, I think the big picture here is, and I think Americans are really starting to get this, there is a Grand Canyon-sized contradiction, if you allow me to use that term, between that's even astonishing, a huge gulf between the image of Robert Mueller that's been portrayed by the mainstream media and Robert Mueller's career. There's a huge Grand Canyon-sized discrepancy between this constitutional awesome burden that we've given him of determining the legality of the presidency and the president, and his biography of the Department of Justice and the FBI of cover-up after cover-up after collusion after corruption.
Well, let's talk about that. In your book, again, we're talking with John Milkovich, and he is the author of the book.
Or Milkovich.
I'm sorry, Milkovich. Yeah, my apologies. John,
that's okay.
John Milkovich. Robert Mueller, errand boy for the New World Order. Talk about Uranium One. You talk about Uranium One in any of the book?
Absolutely. Basically, that's another scam. Dr. Corsi is the expert on this, but he's talking about investigating President Trump for collusion. The real Russian collusion involves Russia, the Clintons, and Robert Mueller. The bottom line is the Clintons were instrumental in transferring 20% of America's uranium interests to the Russians, and in return, the investors in that company that got the uranium ore poured millions of dollars into the Clinton Foundation. And I think Dr. Corsi states in his book, Killing the Deep State, that the Clintons were, their Clinton Foundation received $100, maybe $200 million or more of cash, purportedly or apparently as a result of them transferring uranium to the Russians. Mm-hmm. Well, where was Robert Mueller in there? Standing down, standing by, seeing something, doing nothing. He had the authority to speak up, make some changes, bring indictments, prosecute, investigate. He did nothing while the Russians were getting our uranium and the Clintons were getting over $100 million. So that's the real Russian collusion. And this is a fact that's been demonstrated in one of Hillary Clinton's State Department memos. Robert Mueller, not everyone in America knows this, actually, according to a State Department cable, delivered a small sample of highly enriched uranium to Russian officials on a Russian tarmac in Russia. I mean, that is Russian collusion. So we have him investigating fake collusion. But, we in the book, we try to outline some of his crookedness, the Whitey Bulger gang. Whitey Bulger was the Winter Hill Mafia.
Yeah, talk about that. That's been in the news recently. Whitey Bulger wound up dead, right? There was a prison transfer. I mean, there's some people thinking that Whitey Bulger knew, and had information about, Robert Mueller in some way, because Robert Mueller, wasn't he in Massachusetts at that time?
Oh, absolutely. While Whitey Bulger was running a mafioso racketeering operation that resulted in the deaths of multiple people, FBI agents were actually assisting Whitey Bulger's Winter Hill Mafia in Boston, to the point that they were covering for him, they were tipping him off on local investigative efforts, they were protecting him from law enforcement, they were tipping him off when a law enforcement agency was getting close, they told him when to flee, and like I say, a bunch of dead bodies. One or more writers contend that FBI agents even assisted in the commission and or cover-up of murders with Whitey Bulger. Well, where was Robert Mueller and all that? Chronologically and geographically, he was right in the middle of it. He was first the assistant U.S. attorney in Boston, then the U.S. attorney for over 4 years, right in the middle of about the Whitey Bulger's 19-year reign of terror. What did Robert Mueller do about it? He didn't lift a voice, didn't lift a finger. He saw something, did nothing. We can fast forward a few years later to the Pan Am 103. That was that horrific explosion that cost 270 lives, the Pan Am flight from London to England that blew up over Lockerbie, Scotland. Basically, it was established very quickly after the bombing who was involved. Ahmed Jabril was the terrorist that built the bomb. Al-Qassar was the Syrian drug dealer that helped get it on the plane. There was some rogue CIA involvement. They knew about the bombing ahead of time and gave a green light for the bombing for the flight to proceed with the bomb, and 259 people on board, and 11 people died on the ground later in Lockerbie. And guess what Robert Mueller did? He was brought in to turn the investigation 180 degrees away from the actual killers, and he scapegoated a couple of Libyan intelligence officials that had about as much to do with the bombing as a sixth-grade PE teacher in Des Moines, Iowa. Robert Mueller, that's a hallmark of a Mueller operation. Convict, persecute the innocent, let the guilty go free. I'm sorry.
No, it's fascinating information here. We're talking with John Milkovich. He's a Democrat state senator from Illinois. He's the author of a book, Robert Mueller,
Louisiana.
Of Louisiana. What did I say? Did I say?
You said Illinois, but you've got a lot.
I apologize.
You've got a lot going on.
It's literally here in front of me. I see, Louisiana, Democrat state senator from Louisiana. And Robert Mueller, errand boy for the New World Order. I would like for you to talk a little bit about, you mentioned the relationship between the Bushes and the Clintons and how they were both, or seemed to apparently be both so anti-Donald Trump, and for this Russia collusion narrative. Do you address that any further in the book?
Well, to some degree. Basically what we say, and this is what we know to be fact, Bush Sr. said he voted for Hillary. Bush Jr., W., said he didn't vote. The Clintons, we know where they were. They're tied into Mueller. But let's talk about it. All of these past presidents have been connected to Mueller in one way or the other. Bush Sr. brought Mueller in to clean up, sweep evidence under the rug and make sure the big boys got a slap on the wrist on the BCCI banking scandal, where they were bilking investors out of billions of dollars, bribing politicians, and laundering and financing drug operations and crooked intel ops. so Senior Bush was involved. Junior Bush hired him to head the FBI 1 week before 9/11. Obama came in and extended his directorship of the FBI for 2 years. So Mueller is connected to all of the past presidents of the last, about 20 years.
So so generally you could just say establishment. I mean, definitely, friendly with both the Republican establishment and the Democrat establishment. So he's kind of he's the perfect guy to head this investigation. That is, well, let me ask you this: do you think this was basically they have to investigate Trump for Russia collusion because it's part of a cover-up from the real Russia collusion, that it's kind of projection and deflection, project what you yourself are actually guilty of on your opponent?
You're about 110% right. I could not have said it as well as you just said it. Couldn't have said it better. That's exactly right. And Paul, you're Paul, correct?
That's me, yes. Sorry, I've gotten your name wrong plenty. Feel free to get my name.
No. I won't. You're on it. Yes, and they knew that they could count on Mueller because he's been involved in all these cover-ups. I mentioned Whitey Bulger. I mentioned Pan Am 103. Mentioned BCCI. Ruby Ridge. I have no evidence at this point that he actually orchestrated that incident where the federal agents laid siege to the Weaver family and shot the dad and seriously wounded him, shot the mom to death while she was standing unarmed in the doorway of her house holding her 10-month-old infant daughter. They submachine gunned his son, 14-year-old son, to death as he was running away from what the family said was an ambush by federal agents. So I have no evidence that at this point that Mueller organized that federal siege. What we do know is that afterwards Mueller was furious. Was he furious because the dad got shot, the mom got killed, the 14-year-old teenager got killed? No, he was furious that anyone had the audacity to criticize federal agents for shooting up the family. 9/11, let's go there. What George Bush Jr. appoints him head of the FBI 1 week before 9/11. It's up to the American public to figure out whether that's coincidental or not. That's just a fact. But what we do know is that within days of 9/11, Robert Mueller was wholly invested and involved in flying and whisking the Saudis, the bin Laden, and the Saudi royals, high-ranking Saudis, out of the United States of America so they could not be questioned by federal agents about their involvement in 9/11. Of course, we have since found out that the Saudis there were 15 of the 19 alleged hijackers were from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
We also know that Saudi royals were giving them money, connections, operative support, lodging, basically connecting them to the United States.
And isn't there pending litigation? Isn't there pending litigation about the Saudi Arabia? Meaning that Saudi Arabia can be liable for some of that at this point. Wasn't there something that happened? I think at the end of 2017. I thought about that.
Paul, I am not an expert on that litigation, but you are doing your homework. Yes, there is, and John Kreindler, their lead lawyer, has flat out accused Mueller of being wholly involved in the cover-up of Saudi involvement in 9/11. But it's not only that he covered up for the Saudis, and here we get back to the classic hallmarks of a Mueller operation. He gets the people with the most likely to have culpable knowledge or involvement, the Saudis, the bin Ladens, the Saudi royals and government, high-ranking Saudi officials, out of America. But the other thing he does is he goes to New York City and rounds up a bunch of hapless immigrants, puts them in jail for several months. At least one writer said he personally supervised their abuse or mistreatment. And guess what? They all had in common. They had nothing to do with 9/11. So here we go. This is a Mueller operation. It's all about politics. It's all about optics. It's all about cover-up. The guilty go free. Let's persecute the innocent. We could talk about anthrax, weapons of mass destruction, the surveillance state, the war on Donald Trump. I'm going too fast. But
well, no, I think people need to get the book. Robert Mueller, Aaron Boy for the New World Order. We're talking with John Milkovich. He's a Democrat state senator from Louisiana. Now, John, one last question, kind of generally speaking. I'd like to just back up and talk about Donald Trump for a second and get your take on where he actually falls in the political spectrum. It has been said by many, and because you're a Democrat, I really want to get your opinion on this. It's been said by many that if John F. Kennedy were to run for office today, he wouldn't be able, based on his policies, to secure the nomination from the Democrat Party. I don't even think that's debatable. Do you think that really what we're witnessing here in terms of Donald Trump's politics is that he really is kind of aligned politically with the way the Democrat Party used to be? What are your thoughts?
That is such a brilliant question. I hope you don't get mad at me if I turn right around on you and ask you to answer that question that you posed, because it's an incredibly incisive, insightful question. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's mixture. Obviously, the issues tend to change, as different times and everything else. So it's hard to make a direct comparison. But to me, if you look at John F. Kennedy's tax policy, he was for lower taxes. A lot of times, generally today, the Democrat Party is not for lower taxes. They're more for, making all of us put all of our money into one big pot and divide it up equally. If you look at, John F. Kennedy's, I don't think John F. Kennedy would have ever said that we need to have open borders, for example. I mean, we're talking about basic things about, principles of civilization, of having a country, and I think we've gotten so far away and so in tune to the globalist agenda that one guy comes up and says what everybody used to agree on, both parties really agreed upon, back in the 60s, and 60% of the country, I think, is like, thank goodness we're going to have some sort of common sense.
I think I just got smarter by listening to you, Paul.
Oh, gosh.
I believe you're right on the money. John Kennedy, imperfect man. Donald Trump, imperfect guys.
Yes.
They girls liked them, and anyway, don't have to take that any further. But and I'm all for fidelity in marriage, and one man will. I'm for all that. The Bible shows us that. But this is what we can't miss. John Kennedy and Donald Trump. Someone was telling me, a very prominent radio journalist was telling me the other day after the interview, he says, there's some similarities between John Kennedy and Donald Trump. They're outsiders, both of them. They're cowboys outside of both of them. They're mavericks, both of them. Neither one of them was taking orders from the international banking community. Neither one of them were taking orders from, and I'm not saying either one of them are perfect, but they were not reading a script that was written for them by the United Nations or by the international bankers or for the families that run the Federal Reserve. And they were not willing to trash America to help a small vested group of private insiders make a bunch of money off of America.
Wow.
And I know. I'm sorry.
No, I just said wow. That's extremely succinct. So anyway,
and this whole thing about Mueller being Mr. and Paul, and I think what we try to say in the book. And listen, this is not John Milkovich saying this. The information that we have in the book has been dug up by independent researchers, writers, federal agents, federal intelligence agents, soldiers, veterans, the families of the 9/11 victims. And what they're saying is, look, Mueller's been involved in. We didn't even have the chance to talk about how he covered up the anthrax investigation, targeted an innocent guy who ended up dead so the guilty could go free. He lied to Congress under oath about weapons of mass destruction. I understand that the official tally of weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq was 0, but he was willing to go in front of Congress and repeat the meme. Yeah, there's weapons of mass destruction. We go over there, 4,500 American soldiers' lives lost, and over $1.6 trillion spent by the time we end up paying veterans benefits, and we should, for the veterans wounded. That could end, some people say that could be $4, $5, $6 trillion.
Yeah.
People don't know that Robert Mueller was telling Congress we absolutely need the American government to spy on every law-abiding American citizen, our faxes, our texts, our emails, our telephone calls, our internet searches. He's an advocate for a total surveillance state that would make the communist Chinese or the Nazis or the Soviets proud. Why is he a great American? He's crooked. He's against freedom. He every time he gets involved in an investigation, it seems like he's covering up for the guilty and persecuting the innocent. This man is a walking moral disaster. He's as to use President Trump, he is a disaster.
Wow.
What in the world business do we have, number one, putting him in a position to determine the legitimacy of the president? Number two, the mainstream media going on and on about what a great guy is. That is a farce. He's a crook. Look at his career.
Check the book out, folks. Robert Mueller, Errand Boy for the New World Order. The author is John Milkovich, Democratic state senator from Louisiana. John, it has been a pleasure to have you on this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
You had the best comments, and you made me smarter. So thank you for allowing me to participate in this conversation, Paul.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for coming on. Be safe. God bless.
God bless you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Folks, we're going to take a break. Going to reset here. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Last or 2 years ago on the school choice issue. It was an opportunity to sit down and talk with people, whether you agree or disagree.
All American.
You know, we represent the people of our district.
Yeah.
And that you can't represent them well if you don't know what their beliefs are.
Yeah. And just to clarify, you know, when it comes to 746 and us being a constitutional carry state, you're on board with that.
Absolutely agreed. And matter of fact, I'm sure there's gun legislation in the works right now. People want to talk about restoration of their gun rights. I have a constituent who wrote a hot check when they were 19 or 20, and 30 years later, here they are. It was a felony. It was nonviolent, didn't hurt anybody else, but now 30 years later, they can't go hunting. And they would like to see legislation on restoration of those rights. And although federal law prohibits that on a federal level, state law can allow that to happen. Right now it happens.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, if you want a copy of that video, reference you to my comments at the top of the hour with Mr. John Milkovich on his book about Robert Mueller. That's going to be a separate YouTube video, and it will be uploaded to YouTube sometime today. It'll be at conduitnews.com on the front page. And if you go to the YouTube channel and you will subscribe, click the little bell to receive notifications. Later today, you'll get notified when the video's up, and then you can send it out to people. Because the information in there is quite interesting. If you can get past me, I don't know why I said he was from Louisiana. Illinois. What is going on? It's weird. I said he was from Illinois. I don't know why. Anyway, Yeah, that just goes to show you that the platform that I have here is because I'm lucky and fortunate. We're gonna end the show, and we're gonna see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Be sure to check out the little pre-show that we start over at facebook.com/Conduit News before everything gets going, if you'd like. It's about 5 minutes. And Arkansas, thanks for starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Be safe.